salt. That's what this battery is made of, and it just survived 20,000 charges. Not 2,000, not 5,000, 20,000 without lithium, without cobalt, without nickel. The EV industry spent 30 years and trillions of dollars building a supply chain around materials that come out of the ground at enormous cost. And a company partly owned by Volkswagen just built something that makes all of it look unnecessarily complicated. This is not a lab experiment. Production started in 2026. The cars are already coming. To understand why that number matters, you need to understand what a charge cycle actually costs you. Every time you plug in an electric vehicle, drain it, and charge it again. That's one cycle. A typical lithium-ion pack today is rated for somewhere between 500 and 3,000 cycles before it starts losing meaningful capacity. At one full cycle per day, that's 4 to 8 years of useful life. After that, the pack degrades, range drops, and replacing it, you're looking at $12,000 to $16,000 depending on the vehicle. That number alone makes millions of people nervous about buying used EVs. Now hold that against 20,000 cycles, cycled every single day. That battery would outlast the car, the garage it's parked in, and arguably the owner's grandchildren. That is not an incremental improvement. That is a different category of object entirely. The company that announced this cell is called Gotion High-Tech, a Chinese battery manufacturer headquartered in Hefei. Volkswagen Group holds the largest single stake in Gotion, which makes this announcement land differently than a typical startup press release. This isn't a lab experiment from a university basement. This is a company with industrial-scale manufacturing infrastructure, backed by one of the largest automakers in the world, making a very public claim about sodium-ion technology. And sodium itself, that's the part that reframes the entire story. This isn't some exotic rare earth compound discovered deep in a Chilean mine. Sodium is the element you consume every morning on scrambled eggs. It is extracted from seawater, from rock salt deposits found on every continent. It is, by almost any measure, one of the most abundant materials in the industrial world. The question for decades wasn't whether sodium could store energy. It was whether it could ever store enough. Here is the honest version of sodium's history because the hype skips this part entirely. Sodium-ion batteries have existed as a concept since the 1970s. Researchers understood the basic electrochemistry early on. Sodium ions, like lithium ions, can shuttle between electrodes during charge and discharge, generating an electric current. The physics work. The problem was always energy density. Energy density is simply how much energy a battery can hold relative to its weight. And sodium loses this comparison to lithium in a significant way. A lithium-ion cell typically achieves 150 to 250 watt-hours per kilogram. Early sodium cells were landing at 100 to 140 watt-hours per kilogram. In a world obsessed with range anxiety, that gap was a deal-breaker. More weight, less range. That combination kills a product before it starts. So while sodium researchers tinkered in university labs throughout the 1990s and 2000s, the automotive and consumer electronics industries poured billions into scaling lithium, and lithium responded. Costs collapsed. Manufacturing matured. The technology improved enough that lithium iron phosphate, LFP, became the dominant chemistry in affordable electric vehicles, particularly across China. But here is where most analysts made their mistake. They assumed that because lithium was scaling fast, sodium would never close the gap. That assumption ignored a fundamental pattern in battery technology history. The cheaper, more abundant chemistry always catches up from the bottom. It happened with lead acid to nickel metal hydride. It happened when LFP was dismissed as too heavy and too low density to compete with nickel manganese cobalt cells. And then LFP quietly became the chemistry powering the majority of affordable EVs globally. Sodium is now following the identical trajectory. What changed wasn't a single discovery. It was accumulated improvements in cathode materials, particularly in hard carbon anodes and Prussian blue analog cathodes, that allowed sodium cells to approach performance levels that were previously exclusive to lithium chemistries. The gap in energy density hasn't vanished, but it has narrowed enough that sodium's natural advantages, cost, cold weather resilience, cycle life, and supply chain simplicity, have moved from theoretical to genuinely competitive. Let's go through what these cells are actually doing, because the specifications tell a story that the headlines consistently compress into a single number. Gotion's flagship sodium cell, the one rated at 20,000 cycles, holds 50% of its original capacity at -40 degrees Celsius. That is a temperature at which most lithium packs become functionally unreliable. Reduced range, painfully slow charging, and accelerated long-term degradation. Goshen's cell also passed a nail penetration test, where an 8mm steel nail was driven directly through the cell body. No fire, no thermal runaway. In a lithium cell, that same test frequently produces fire and smoke within seconds due to internal short-circuit heating. The honest caveat, and this matters, is that Goshen's 20,000 cycle cell is currently designed for stationary energy storage, not automotive applications. Grid-scale batteries, commercial backup systems, industrial facilities. Goshen stated this clearly. The chemistry optimized for maximum cycle life at a fixed installation is not the same configuration you drop into a moving vehicle constrained by weight and volume. But here is what's already going into cars right now. CATL, the largest battery manufacturer on Earth by volume, launched its sodium-ion product called Naxtra into mass production for vehicles in 2026. The specifications are concrete. Approximately 500 kilometers of range per charge, 80% charge replenishment in around 15 minutes, and a cycle life rating exceeding 10,000 full cycles. That cycle figure represents 3 to 6 times the useful lifespan of a typical lithium pack in consumer EVs today. BYD's sodium roadmap targets the same 10,000 cycle threshold. The cost trajectory is where this becomes strategically dangerous for the existing market leaders. Chinese manufacturers have indicated sodium cell production costs are approaching approximately 4 cents per watt-hour, directly competing with LFP pricing. Analysts at multiple research firms project sodium and LFP costs to intersect around 2027. At that crossover point, sodium's advantages in cycle life and cold weather performance become pure upside at equivalent price. That is the inflection point the lithium industry is watching very carefully. The company most exposed to this shift is not a legacy automaker struggling with AV transition. It is Tesla. Tesla's affordability strategy in its high-volume segments runs on LFP chemistry, the iron-based cells that Elon Musk specifically described as the foundation for mass-market electrification. That bet made sense when sodium wasn't competitive. It looks more complicated now that sodium is directly targeting LFP's core selling points: low cost, long life, and supply chain independence. The broader implications extend well beyond passenger vehicles. China already commissioned the world's first grid-forming sodium-ion storage installation in Yunnan province, a 200-megawatt facility capable of regulating power supply for hundreds of thousands of homes, operating predominantly on renewable input. CATL and Goshen are not alone. Natron Energy is constructing a $4 billion sodium gigafactory in North Carolina, targeting data centers, commercial trucks, and grid backup infrastructure. Their claimed cycle rating exceeds 50,000 cycles, and their product contains 0 lithium, 0 cobalt, and 0 nickel. Forecasts from industry analysts project China manufacturing over 90% of global sodium cells by 2030, with the total market expanding nearly 30-fold by 2034. The partnership between Sinopec and LG Chem on sodium cathode materials signals that this is no longer purely a Chinese domestic technology story. The pattern is clear. Sodium is not competing only for the car. It is competing to become the foundational chemistry underneath the entire electric energy economy. Step back and look at the full picture. This is the same story the battery industry has told twice before, with nickel, then with LFP. The cheaper, more abundant, initially inferior material gets dismissed. Then it gets good enough. Then it rewrites the economics from the ground up. Sodium isn't replacing lithium next year. The cell breaking cycle records today is not the cell going under a hood tomorrow. But the cells going under hoods in 2026 are already competitive on range, superior in cold weather, and on a direct collision course with LFP on cost by 2027. You now understand what the headline number actually means, and what it doesn't. The record-breaking cell and the production-ready cell are 2 rungs on the same ladder, and that ladder is moving faster than the lithium industry expected. Salt, the most unremarkable material in your kitchen, the thing that might quietly restructure a $1 trillion industry,